Institute. He also spoke at the UK-India Healthcare Summit held at the UK Parliament in London in 2016. He is married to Shirin, a teacher by profession, blessed with two girl children. Elder one Nidhi Sudin, who is studying third year BHMS at Sharada Krishna Homeopathic Medical College, Tamil Nadu, and younger one Diya Sudin, pursuing her education in 12th standard. Without much wasting time, I hand over session to you, Dr. Sudin Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Sai Kiran. First of all, I would like to thank the Student Council of Alva Swamipuri Medical College, Mangalore, for giving me this opportunity to present this short webinar on fever management, especially pediatric fever management. I thank Mr. Manish, Mr. Sai Kiran, Feba, Ms. Feba, and Ms. Hania for the organizers of this webinar series. And at the same time, I would like to extend my greetings to my friends at Alva Swamipuri Medical College, especially Dr. Praveen Raj, of course, your principal, Dr. Roshan Pindo, Dr. Prajna, and Dr. Manu Bhatt. And I have been to your college 3 times, and all the 3 times I have experienced and enjoyed the hospitality of Alva Swamipuri Medical College. I still cherish those wonderful memories. So let's go straight to our topic today. That is homeopathic management of pediatric fevers. Fever, for the common man, it's a disease. But for medical students like you, or for medical professionals, fever is only a symptom. That means it's a symptom of a particular disease. That is, then some underlying disease is causing that fever. So beyond that, it's only a symptom, and there is some underlying disease that is lurking behind, that is producing this fever. And fever, among the acute diseases that come to our clinics every day, fever is the presenting symptom in majority of the complaints. That means a lot of infections. Fever, but the main cause of fever is infections, whether it be bacterial, viral, or some other cause. So majority of the cases will be presenting with fever. So we should be thorough in dealing with fever cases with our homeopathic medicines. And I can tell you, our medicines act very fast than allopathic medicines in managing fevers. This I'm saying from my 26 years of experience. I see a lot of acute cases in my clinic. Never in my life I was disappointed with our drugs in controlling. Of course, some a few cases may be there, which I have to refer to the higher center. That occurs even with any general practitioner. But in all other cases, I've been able to manage fever very well with our homeopathic drugs. And in the eyes of the patients, if you treat a fever easily, or if you treat fever very well, in the sense, if you are able to reduce the temperature in a fever case within 24 hours, you are a good physician. However, chronic cases you treat, however difficult chronic cases you treat, that may not be counted. But if you are able to control the fever in 24 hours, you are considered as a good physician by the patients. So that is the importance of fever. And as I said, fever accounts for almost 15 to 25% of consultations that come to our clinic and emergency departments. And this fever is always a very great concern for the parents, not for us, because we see a lot of cases daily. It's not a concern for us, but for the parents, this is a great concern. And even though it is a great concern for the parents, the prevalence of serious infections which are causing this fever is very low, because majority of the fevers are easily curable or easily treatable. And it is less than 1% of cases, 1% of fever cases that require a serious management or that requires hospital admission or something like that. Only less than 1%. The remaining 99% of cases we can treat very easily in our own clinics. So this means that even though managing pediatric fever seems to be a simple affair, it should not be complacent. It should not be complacent because fever in children, especially if the child is below 3 months of age, that should be considered something serious, and you should approach it in that way. So here in this session, I am discussing how we should approach pediatric fevers in a primary care center, that is our own clinic, and showing how easy it is to treat or manage fevers with homeopathy. Now, so as the definition goes, now before that, I have my own confessions. The guidelines on fever management that is detailed in this session that belongs to National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, UK. And regarding the therapeutic part, it may not all be from authentic textbooks or source books, because majority of my discussions here on the therapeutic part will be from my own clinical experience. You may not find those symptoms or those remedies, not remedies, it is not the symptoms of some remedies you cannot find in textbooks. Okay, that is all from my personal experience. Okay. So fever, as per the definition, it's a normal physiological response to illness that facilitates and accelerates recovery. So it's a simple definition. That's our normal medical definition of fever. And it is often associated with a self-limiting viral infection. So in majority of the fever cases, the causation will be of viral in nature, and that is self-limiting. And sometimes it could be a presenting symptom of a more serious condition that requires urgent medical care. That means less than 1% of cases. In the other remaining 99% of cases, most often it's a self-limiting condition. Very often we find some fever cases getting cured automatically. That means if we give 24 hours for the fever to subside, that will get cured automatically. Many times that happen. I have a lot of experience like that, because sometimes there may be a call at night that the parent calling, my child is having fever, he's having so much of complaints, headache, body pain, cough, like that. So at that time, it may not be possible for them to come to my home or clinic. So I will tell them some general measures to control the fever, like rapid sponging, drinking a lot of water, and such managements can reduce the temperature. So most often it's a self-limiting condition. Okay, only in less than 1% of cases, you should take serious nature of fever. Okay, some general principles regarding fever. It's only when the core body temperature reaches 38 degree or more, we consider it as fever. 38 degrees Celsius means 98.6 degree, sorry, 100.4 degree Fahrenheit. Only then the rise of temperature is considered as fever. And there should be a diagnosis before treatment is initiated. In all cases of fever, we should have a diagnosis. Without diagnosis, we should not treat the fever case just to reduce the temperature. Okay. And as I said, most of the fever cases are due to self-limiting viral infections, but it could be caused by some bacterial infections which are more serious, and that should be excluded. And always be careful while dealing with a child below 3 months with fever. That should be considered as significant, and you have to thoroughly investigate that case to find out the cause of the fever. And pathogenesis of fever, that means the causation of fever, external causes or exogenous pathogens, bacteria and the enterotoxins, viruses, protozoans, yeasts, spirochetes, immune reactions. Immune reactions means like some rheumatic fever, SLE. In some conditions, the fever is caused by some immune reactions. Then progestational hormones like progesterone. Progesterone can cause temperature rise. Especially you can see that on the 14th day of the menses, that means on the day of ovulation, there will be a slight rise of temperature. And then drugs can cause fever. Drugs in the sense, not homeopathic drugs, the allopathic drugs, mainly penicillin, sulfonamides, like that. Such drugs also can cause fever. And there are some endogenous pyrogens, that means the causes within our body. These are interleukin-1 alpha and beta and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are actually proteins. These are called cytokines. Cytokines, these are produced by the body in response to an infection. When any organism enters our body, the body synthesizes these cytokines, and the function of these cytokines is to produce prostaglandin. And these prostaglandins act on the preoptic hypothalamus, and which is the thermoregulatory mechanism of our body. The hypothalamus is the thermoregulatory mechanism of our body, and it acts on the hypothalamus to raise the body temperature. So the body temperature will be raised, and it reaches a stable level. It means it will keep on rising and it reaches a set point, and it will not go uncontrolled because there is a thermoregulatory mechanism there. So it will reach at a stable point, and at this time, the blood in which the hypothalamus is situated, the covered, that will be having the same temperature. So at this temperature, the organisms will be killed, or it will not be able for them to survive in that temperature. So that is a defensive mechanism of the body to raise the body temperature when there is an infection. So that is endogenous pyrogens. Then diseases accompanied by fever. Commonly, all infections that I told you, when there is an infection, there will be fever. Okay. And this is due to immune mechanisms that I already dealt with, SLE, rheumatic fever, like that. Autoimmune diseases can cause fever. Diseases with vascular inflammation, especially phlebitis, thrombophlebitis, etc. Thrombosis can cause fever. Then tissue infarction, just as in the case of myocardial infarction. When there is myocardial infarction, there will be a slight rise of temperature. And trauma can also cause fever. Then granulomatous disorders. The commonest example is sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis, granulomatous hepatitis is another example. Then inflammatory bowel diseases two inflammatory IBDs. Two inflammatory bowel diseases are there: Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. These two conditions can cause fever. Then neoplastic disorders, as you know, leukemia is a common example. Leukemia is a very good example of neoplastic disorders. Lymphoma is another example. Then acute metabolic disorders. Acute metabolic disorders are otherwise called as inborn errors of metabolism. For example, gout. Gout is a very good example. Polio, glycogen storage disease. All these conditions can cause fever. Then look at the fever patterns. There are two types of classifications. First one is the intermittent fever. Intermittent fever, it's not as given in our organon, not the definition given by Dr. Hahnemann. In intermittent fever, what happens is that the fever, there will be fever at night. There will be high rise of fever at night. And by morning, the fever comes down and touches the normal. That means in the morning, there will not be any fever. And this follows a circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm means the body has a circadian rhythm. Like during daytime, we keep awake, and during night, we go to sleep. This is a time-related circadian rhythm. Okay, that's a physical or mental or behavioral changes that follow a daily pattern. Okay, there will be some conditions like that following a circadian. You know, the remedy Sedron. It has got clock-like periodicity. A particular time of the day, there is aggravation of the complaint. So that's a circadian rhythm. Okay, that is intermittent fever. And examples of intermittent fevers are pyogenic infections. pyogenic infection, where there is pus formation. That means abscess. Abscess is a good example. Then miliary tuberculosis. Not only miliary tuberculosis, tuberculosis also. Pulmonary tuberculosis can also cause intermittent type of fever. Then lymphomas also have intermittent type of fever. Then second one is the remittent fever. Remittent fever means the temperature comes down in the morning, but it never touches the normal. There will be reduction in the temperature, but it will not touch normal. But in intermittent fever, that in the morning the temperature comes to normal. Okay, that is the difference. And majority of the fevers comes under this category, that is the remittent fever. Then there is a sustained fever. There is persistent elevation of the body temperature without any diurnal variations. Means there will not be any variation at night. Whether it will not aggravate at night, it will not come down in the daytime. There is persistent elevation of temperature. Okay. And the best example is typhoid fever. You know, the stepladder fever pattern of typhoid. Okay. It keeps on rising day by day. Then there is a relapsing fever. Relapsing fever means there will be short febrile periods in between one or several days of normal temperature. There will be fever for say for 2 to 3 days. Then next 1 or 2 days there will not be any fever, normal temperature. Then again fever comes. So that is remission and relapse. So that is the relapsing fever. And the best example is malaria. Okay. And another classification is like short febrile illness, SFI, that means short febrile illness. Here that fever will be lasting for about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. And fever runs its course, and it's relieved gradually. That's a short febrile illness. Even without treatment, it will come down. Okay, that is SFI. Then there is the prolonged febrile illness. Here, fever lasts for weeks or months, sometimes for more than 2 or 3 weeks, or even for a month, with the diagnosis remaining obscure. We cannot find out the diagnosis of this prolonged febrile. We will not be able to diagnose why this fever is occurring. Okay. Then there is fever of unknown origin, or earlier it is called as pyrexia of unknown origin, PUO or FUO, pyrexia of unknown origin. Here what happens is that fever is the main symptom in the disease of that patient, but we cannot find out a cause. So the difference between PFI and PUO is that in PUO we cannot find out the cause for the fever in that particular disease. Some disease is there, we can diagnose the disease, but we cannot find out the cause for the fever. That is PUO. Then habitual hypothermia means some patients may have their body temperature elevated all the time without any associated illness. No illness will be there, no disease will be there, but their body temperature will be remaining high all the time. So this is the 2 types of classification of fever patterns. Then what is the clinical importance of fever? Temperature is a simple, objective and accurate indicator of a physiological state when measured correctly. It should be measured correctly. That's the main thing. Earlier when we were using this mercury thermometer, measuring the temperature was very important. While using the mercury thermometer, you should keep the thermometer for 3 minutes, minimum 3 minutes. That's the time that's required to measure the temperature correctly. But now we are using infrared and digital thermometers, but there is no need. You will get the temperature automatically. And it is never altered by external or psychogenic stimuli, never altered by any psychological factors, whether the patient is in a stress or in an anxiety. The fever will not change, that will remain static. And as with other diseases, we should have a good medical history of that fever case. Ask about the fever onset, when was it started, the duration, how many days, whether it is continuous, intermittent or remittent, like we can find out the pattern, fever pattern. Then response to general measures or medication. Sometimes the parents will come the next day after fever, means fever started yesterday. So we can ask whatever things he did, whether given any medicines or any other measures, general measures to control the fever. Then along with fever, what are the other signs and symptoms? Ask about it. Because from this, we can assess whether the patient is having any serious condition or not, or we can have a diagnosis of that condition, associated signs and symptoms. And also ask about any recent use of medicines, because sometimes they may have given any antipyretic medicines, any allopathic medicines, and by that the temperature will have come down. So that should be checked. And history of any vaccinations. Vaccination can cause fever, so that should be inquired. And recent travel, that is very significant during this time, that is Corona time. Travel history is very important. Then health of other family members, whether they had some any illness or whether there was fever in the family, like that. And history of any previous illness. So this could be this fever could be secondary to some other previous illness. So that should be inquired into. And also the activity level. Activity level is very important, because to assess the condition of the patient, or we are dealing with children or infants. To assess the condition of the child, checking the activity level is very important, because that is also important in the prescription point of view also. When selecting the remedy also, this activity level is important, because we can decide the remedy depending upon the activity of the child. That will come later on. And also examination. First, if we take the history, then we examine the case. Just in other cases, always the initial impressions. Whether you always look for any life-threatening illness. Any ill look for whether the child is ill-looking. Ill-looking means some serious illness may be there. Fever may be very high, so the child will be very ill-looking. And look for dehydration also. We will see the signs of dehydration later. So this should be looked into. Then look for the vital signs, the temperature. You should measure the temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, capillary refill time, and blood pressure. Blood pressure, that may not be possible in pediatric cases all the time, because we need a pediatric cough. Otherwise, we should not try to measure the blood pressure. Capillary refill time is very important when with regard to dehydration and shock in case of fever. So capillary refill time, how can we measure the capillary refill? You just press the tip of the finger of the child. Press the tip of the finger and see, you can see the blanching. There will be blanching. So when you release the pressure, when you remove that finger, the normal color of the skin will be retained. That should be retained within 3 minutes. Within 3 minutes, the normal color should be retained. So when you press, there is blanching. And when you release the finger, the color should be retained within 3 minutes. If it goes beyond 3 minutes, not 3 minutes, sorry, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. I beg your pardon. It should be retained within 3 seconds. So if it goes beyond 3 seconds, something is wrong. So that should be one method to assess the state of the child, whether the child is in a serious state or not. Okay, there is a simple technique that should be practiced in your clinic. Then assess risk of serious illness. You can ask for other symptoms and signs and see whether there is any risk for any serious illness, like maybe neck rigidity. Neck rigidity indicates meningitis, or some other signs that will come later. And a complete examination is mandatory in all children presenting with fever, with particular attention to possible sources of bacterial infection. Bacterial infection is the main cause of complications in fever cases of children, pediatric fevers. Viral fevers, most of them are self-limiting, nothing to worry, but bacterial infection you should be very careful about. So these are the bacterial infections causing fever, which are to be excluded. You should look for otitis media. Otitis media, inflammation of the middle ear. That will cause, initially there will be high fever with pain, severe pain in the ear. Then there will be rupture of the tympanic membrane, and there will be discharge from the ear. Otorrhea will be there. Okay. So you can check whether all these signs are there to rule out otitis media. Then look for UTI, urinary tract infection. Let's see whether there is high fever, shivering or rigor, that is chilliness, rigoring or shiver. Then look for any vomiting, whether there is any dysuria, this means pain during urination, and frequency of urination. So these are the signs of UTI. Then streptococcal pharyngitis and tonsillitis. You can check the throat and see whether there is pharyngitis and tonsillitis. And this pharyngitis and tonsillitis should not be mixed. These are two entities. The patients may come and tell us, doctor, I am having tonsillitis, but actually it may be a pharyngitis. So it should be able to differentiate between pharyngitis and tonsillitis. Then pneumonia. Pneumonia is another serious condition. There will be high fever with tachypnea. Okay, and cough may be there. And severe respiratory distress will be there. Okay. Then meningitis, as I said, there will be neck rigidity. And you can elicit Kernig sign to see whether there is meningitis or not. And there will be bulging of the fontanelles. Anterior and posterior fontanelles will be bulged in meningitis. Then enteritis, there will be high fever with rigors. Rigors will be there, and either vomiting or diarrhea. Enteritis. Then sinusitis, you can see whether there is any tenderness of the sinuses, so the frontal, maxillary, ethmoid, and sphenoid sinuses. You can check for the tenderness at these areas: frontal, maxillary, root of the nose. And in sphenoid sinusitis, you can get pain of the occipital area. Okay. Then skin and soft tissue infections like impetigo cellulitis. Cellulitis, you can just seeing the case, you can identify it as cellulitis. And impetigo also, it is you can diagnose it very easily. Then bone and joint infections like pyogenic arthritis, whether any joint is inflamed, whether there is severe pain in the joint with edema, local edema or effusion. Then look for any septicemia or bacteremia. There is fever with severe rigor, that is indicative of septicemia. And you can also look for any local lymphadenitis. Okay. Sorry. Now, when a child comes to a clinic with fever, what are the things to be done? First of all, you should look at the child and try to answer these questions about the child. Whether the child is older than 3 months. Is the child eating and drinking normally? Is the child behaving normally? Is the child breathing normally? So these are the 4 questions that should be asked about the child to the parents. Okay. So if the answer to these 4 questions are no, if the answer to these 4 questions are no, you have to refer that patient immediately, because the child is in a very serious condition. Okay. Then the next set of questions about the symptoms, about the fever symptoms. Has the fever been present for more than 2 days? Has the child had convulsions? Are you very worried about the child's health, whether there was any febrile fits or not, and whether the parent is very much worried about the child's health because they know the child's condition. And if the answer to these 3 questions, 3 sets of questions is yes, again, you have to refer that patient immediately. We should not take that case. Okay. That needs management at a higher center. And if the answer to the first set of questions is yes, and to the second set of questions is no, you can proceed further and look for any danger signs. Whether the child is lethargic or unconscious, these are the danger signs. Is the child inconsolably irritable? Inconsolably irritable means the patient will be crying and crying and crying, keep on crying. You will not be consoled by anything that is done. In this context, we will always think of Sina or Kamomilla. A child crying inconsolably, we always think about Sina, giving Sina or Kamomilla. Never think like that. We should find out the cause for that cry, because inconsolably irritable child means there should be some meningeal irritation or some causation in the brain that is causing the child to cry inconsolably. Always this should be put in the mind. And does the child have signs of dehydration or shock? We will see the signs of dehydration or shock later. So if the answer is yes, here also immediate referral. We have to refer that patient immediately. We cannot manage the patient at the clinic. And if the answer is no, we can manage them. We can manage the patient at the clinic. We can take the case in detail and give the appropriate medicine and give the necessary directions to the parents. Okay, this is how we take the case of fever in our clinic. Very simple. you know, which are the points to be noted when we have to refer the patient. Okay. Now, always look for this dangerous signs, initial impressions on looking at a child with fever. That means potentially life-threatening features like see whether ABC is compromised. ABC, airway, breathing, and circulation is compromised. Always rule out this. Okay. Airway compromise means some blockage in the airway. Breathing compromise means any alternation in the breathing pattern, whether tachypnea, bradypnea, respiratory arrest, or respiratory failure, something like that. Okay. Circulation means see whether there is any signs of shock. Okay. So if ABC is compromised, we can do nothing. Immediate referral is the only option. Then always look for decreased level of consciousness, whether the patient is in an unconscious state or not. Okay. Then features characterizing a toxic child are pallor or cyanosis. Pallor or cyanosis, that means it's a state of shock. Then lethargy. Then inconsolably irritable, as I told, that's a sign of meningeal irritation. Then tachycardia and tachypnea, something wrong with the heart and lungs. So these are symptoms that characterize a toxic child. We should not take risk in these cases. We can immediately refer these cases. Okay. And referring the patient is always good. Never think that we are going inferior by referring a case. Always think that it should be the right thing, because the correct referral always saves a patient. On-time referral always saves a patient. Okay. So you should not feel guilty by referring a case that you could not do something. Never feel like that. Okay. Now we'll look for the signs of dehydration shock. So on dehydration, what we'll see is that little or no urine. The child will not have passed urine for the past 24 hours, or even if passed urine, only very little urine, even though there was enough fluid intake. Then dry mouth and lips, just like in bryonia, dry mouth and lips. Then crying without tears. Without any tears, the child will be crying on. Then abnormal skin turgor. Abnormal skin turgor means it's a very good sign of dehydration. That means usually we have elasticity of our skin. When you pinch our skin and release it, it automatically goes back. That is due to the elasticity of the skin. So in dehydration, what happens is that you pinch the skin here like this, and it will remain there like that when you release it. It will not go back. So the skin will lose its elasticity. That means abnormal skin turgor. Then abnormal respiratory pattern, as I told, tachypnea, bradypnea, or Kussmaul's breathing, Cheyne-Stokes breathing. These are all signs of serious conditions. Then look for any weak pulse, cool extremities, sunken fontanelle. Sunken fontanelle means you check the anterior and posterior fontanelle, especially in children below 2 years. After 2 years, these fontanelles will be closed. So children below 2 years, you have to check for the fontanelles in all cases of fever. So when there is dehydration, these fontanelle will be sunken. Then poor capillary refill, that means that means more than 3 seconds. Okay. Then what are the signs and symptoms of shock? There will be cool, clammy skin. The child will be pale or ashen, and there will be rapid pulse. Rapid breathing will be there. Nausea or vomiting may be there. Enlarged pupils will be there. Weakness or fatigue, and dizziness or fainting. These all suggest the patient is in a state of shock, circulatory failure. Okay. Now, coming back to dealing with an acute fever. First of all, we will see a patient aged less than 1 month. Here it is told as referred to the pediatrician. This is a recommendation by the NICE UK. That's the UK standard. But in our case, we can treat less than 1 month infants. We can treat even newborn cases. We will treat even newborn cases. So there is no need to refer to pediatrician unless there is any serious condition. Okay. And age 1 to 3. Before that, let me ask you one question. What is this pediatric age group? Pediatric age groups. The pediatric age group is from newborn to 18 years of age. That is the latest pattern. from newborn to 18 years of age. It includes 18, that means up to 18 years, up to and including 18 years. Okay. So age 1 to 3 months. Here, as I told before, a detailed history and examination is needed. And if there is, you can find an obvious source of fever. That means if you reach at a diagnosis that this is the cause of fever, you can treat that condition and arrange for follow-up. Okay, and give the necessary instructions to the parents. And if you can't find any obvious source of fever, that means you can't reach at a diagnosis. If you can't reach at a diagnosis, better to refer that patient to a higher center or your senior physician. You can refer to your senior homeopath or to a higher center. Always do the never feel guilty by referring that patient. And here that is transferring the patient, the things that should be taken into consideration while transferring the patient. This is not important for us because stabilizing the patient first, ensure respiratory and hemodynamic stability, treat hypoglycemia, and initiate any treatment recommended by the specialist over phone. This is very important because many often when a patient is referred to a higher center, death occurs on the way to the hospital. That is due to the wrong way of transferring the patient without taking the adequate measures. If you refer the patient, if you transfer the patient will not reach the higher center. So this should be taken into consideration. This is not applicable for us, but just for your information. Now, if you can't find any obvious source of it, that means if you can't see any diagnosis, in such cases, you can wait once more in the sense, we can classify those cases into 3: low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. This is called traffic light system. Here you can see the green light. Green means you can go, no problem, low risk. Amber color, amber intermediate risk. That means wait. You can wait and see whether there is any other indications for referring the patient. And finally, the high risk group or the red light. Here you can do nothing, just refer the patient. That's the only thing. So this is called the traffic light system. And this is an easy method that you can put into practice by which you can determine whether the patient in front of you should be referred or not. Okay, or whether he can manage himself. And there is another method that is practiced in US that is called Pediatric Assessment Triangle, PAT. That's called PAT. Here, only 3 things are taken into consideration. One is the general appearance of the patient. Second one is the breathing, the pattern of breathing. And third one is circulation to the skin. That means signs of shock. Only these 3 things are taken into consideration in PAT method, Pediatric Assessment Method, Pediatric Assessment Triangle. Okay, but this is more precise if you look at it. See, we can see the low risk group. Look for whether the child is crying or not, strong cry or not crying. Whether child is content. Content means the patient is happy or smiles. The patient stays awake. The child stays awake. Normal color of the skin, lips and tongue. Normal skin and eyes, no dehydration, the skin turgor is not lost. Okay, elasticity is not lost. Then moist mucous membranes. There is no dryness of the mucous membrane. And normal response to social cues. The child is responding to your actions. So in that case, it's a very low risk case. So that cases can be treated in your clinic and the patient can be managed at home, no problem. Okay. In the second group, that is in the intermediate risk group, see whether the child is waking up with a prolonged stimulation. Here, the patient is slightly weak. So it needs prolonged stimulation to wake the child. That means by giving a tap or something like that, the child will wake up. There will be decreased activity. Activity level is slightly low. Then poor feeding. The infant will not take the breast milk. Then not responding normally to social cues and no smile. And dry mucous membranes. Reduced urine output. Pallor. Nasal flaring. Nasal flaring means you can see the alanase, flapping of the alanase as in lycopodium. Okay. flapping of the alanase, that is nasal flaring. That's a sign of respiratory distress. That means the patient is in a serious condition. So that should be looked into, nasal flaring. Then tachypnea, increased respiratory rate. And look for any lump larger than 2 cm. That could be a sign of any recent onset of any malignancy, like lymphoma or some other leukemia conditions. There may be lymphadenitis. Okay, so such lumps should be noted. And not weight bearing and not using an extremity because of some inflammation or some infection of the joints due to some pyogenic arthritis like that, and other signs of dehydration. In such cases, you can group this as intermediate risk. Intermediate risk means you can take some risk, then you can wait. You can look for abnormal physiology in such cases. And if there is, you can find any abnormal physiology, that means you do some blood test or urine test, and you see some variations there, and you can immediately refer that patient to the pediatrician. And if there are no abnormal physiologies noted, you can further wait. You can consult with your seniors, or you can refer that refer your source books, and you can get more symptoms from the patient, and you can do other special investigations needed and reach a diagnosis. And if you cannot reach a diagnosis even then immediate referral is the option. But if you get a diagnosis, then yes, you can treat and you can follow up the case. Okay, so that is the intermediate group. Here we can wait and see for other signs and symptoms of very serious illness, and you can do other investigations and then find a diagnosis. And if a diagnosis is not available, you can refer that case. And if you're able to find a diagnosis, you can treat that case and follow up. Okay. And in this third group, that is the high risk group, the child is unable to rouse, or if aroused, not awake. Weak, high-pitched or continuous cry, inconsolably irritable child. Okay. Then the skin will be pale, mottled and blue or ashen. Reduced skin turgor. Moderate or severe chest indrawing. Chest indrawing means downward and inward movement of the lower chest wall while breathing in. During inspiration, usually what happens is that during inspiration, our chest expands. But when there is respiratory distress, what happens is that there is downward and inward movement of the lower chest wall during inspiration. That's called chest indrawing. That's a sign of respiratory distress. And tachypnea, respiratory rate more than 60 per minute. That's a high tachypnea. Grunting. Then bulging fontanelle. Bulging fontanelle. Both fontanelle should be checked in meningitis or encephalitis. You can see the bulging fontanelle. But in some other benign conditions also, you can get bulging fontanelle, like 6th disease. You can get bulging fontanelle. Okay. Then appearing ill, age 3 to 6 months, and temperature more than 39 degrees Celsius, non-blanching rash, neck stiffness, focal neurological signs, focal seizures, and bile stained vomiting. These are all serious signs of a particular underlying disease. So we cannot wait in such cases, and we have to immediately refer to the pediatrician. Okay, this is how we group the fever cases into 3: low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk. The traffic light system. Okay. Now vaccination, as you all know, in vaccination, after vaccination, there may be a slight rise of temperature, but usually that should not be treated. Only if the child is having any other complications or any other discomfort, only then you have to interfere. Otherwise, in vaccinations, you should not give any medicines just to control the fever. Okay. Then another important thing is reassuring the parents, because as I told, the parents will be coming with great anxiety because it's an infant and he's having high fever. So there'll be a lot of anxiety with the parents. So we have to reassure the parents, like fever is not an illness. It's a beneficial response of the body. And most fevers are of short duration. And always think that children with seizures or dehydration or brain damage are not at risk. These are things that some misconceptions among the parents, like if the child is having seizures or if there is any signs of dehydration, the child may die. So that's a misconception that should be addressed. Then, and body temperature can fluctuate with the disease. There can be some fluctuation that should be taught to the parents, and the fever will return until the illness is better. Until the underlying disease is cured, the fever will not be relieved. Okay, and strict control of fever is never required. They always tell the parents, never. There is no need to suppress the fever. Okay. Then management of fever at home. Tepid sponging is not recommended. That is for fevers at home, because sometimes the parents do the tepid sponging in a wrong way. Usually what we recommend is that use lukewarm water for tepid sponging, and to sponge the areas like axilla and inguinal area where there is maximum circulation, both axilla and inguinal area, not to sponge the entire body. These are the main areas. Okay. Do not overdress or underdress the child or wrap in blankets. Sometimes the parents may wrap the child in the blankets. That's another misconception. Always open the room. Always give enough ventilation. And encourage the child to drink fluids regularly. That is very important in case of fevers. And in case of infants, breast milk is enough. And always ask the parents to give the medicines at the correct time. And always look for the child at night whether for any signs, whether any warning signs are there. Okay. So these are the points to be noted while managing fevers at home. Now these are some red flag signs of some conditions by which you can easily identify a particular disease that is very serious. These are red flag signs. Yeah, you can see meningococcal meningitis. The red flag signs are non-blanching rash, particularly with one or more of the following. Along with non-blanching rash, if you see in diameter, that is purpura, capillary refill time more than 3 seconds, and neck stiffness. So these are the red flag signs of meningococcal meningitis. And for bacterial meningitis, you can see neck stiffness, bulging fontanelle, decreased level of consciousness, and convulsive status epilepticus. Status epilepticus. Okay, the patient will be continuously having fits. Then, in case of herpes simplex and encephalitis, you can see focal neurological signs, focal seizures, and decreased level of consciousness. And in pneumonia, as you all know, tachypnea, crackles in the chest, nasal flaring, chest indrawing, cyanosis, and oxygen saturation below 95%. Using the pulse oximeter, you can find out the oxygen saturation. If it goes below 95, it will be very serious. Then UTI, urinary tract infection. Sorry. Will be vomiting, poor feeding, lethargy, irritability, abdominal pain or tenderness, urinary frequency or dysuria. These are the red flag signs of UTI. Then septic arthritis or pyogenic arthritis, you can see swelling of a limb or joint, not using an extremity, that means the patient will not use that limb, and non-weight bearing. And in Kawasaki disease, fever for more than 5 days and at least 4 of the following symptoms: bilateral congenital injection, change in mucous membranes, change in the extremities, polymorphous rash, and cervical infection. So these are extremely serious conditions, and these are its red flag signs by which you can identify these conditions. This is something for the academic purpose. Age-specific vital signs and lab values. You can see in the slide later. Now, we have seen the symptoms of fever. Now the complications. Only 3 complications are there. One is dehydration, hallucinations and delirium, and febrile seizure. These are the only complications of fever. Then investigations in fever. Complete blood count, CBC. While doing CBC, you can get a lot of information about the fever. There can be leukocytosis, or can be leukocytopenia. There can be thrombocytosis like that, or maybe an ESR will be increased. So all these inflammations give you some clue to a diagnosis. Then urine analysis also. You can see whether there is UTI or any other signs of some serious illness. Okay. Then blood culture to identify, oh, that's not important for us. Then C-reactive for the CRP. CRP means it is done to find whether there is an infection or not. In all infections, CRP will be increased. Normal level is less than 6. If it is more than 6, you can assume that there is some infection that is lurking behind. Then chest X-ray only if respiratory signs are present, and stool culture if diarrhea is present. So these are the common investigations that we do in case of fever. Okay, and other investigations, other special investigation we'll do if there is any indication for that. If there is any indication for any serious illness like Koenig sign we do for meningitis. Okay, and chest X-ray for pneumonia. So in such cases, we do such a special investigation. So these are the common investigations. Okay. So that we come to the fever, the theory part. Now coming to the practical part, that means the homeopathic management. In homeopathic management, as in all cases, you can see that you can use medicines from Apis canadensis to Zingamet in all cases of fever. Any of these more than 3,000 remedies can come in any fever, because we have this particular method of individualization. So unless you find a particular remedy, unless you find the remedy for that particular disease, you will not be able to cure that case. Okay, so that is the classical method. Take the case in detail, get all the symptoms, all the general and general physical journals, mental journals, everything, and find out what is peculiar in that case, the PQRS, and you can prescribe on that. So identifying the person, you can prescribe. But this is a laborious process. Okay, laborious process in the sense, if you have a good OP, say you're practicing in the morning session, you're practicing for 4 hours. Usually, what we can do, patient comes to the clinic, opens the door and comes to the clinic. You extend a smile and you ask the patient this 15 minutes for a minimum. And inquiring more about the case, like physical journals, mental journals, other things, to person in that case will be 30 minutes. So you cannot go like this. In fever case, in acute case, if you have more than some say 40 cases for
Hello, sir. Sir, I think audio is breaking. Hello, sir. Sir, I am audible.
hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear. I am audible now.
Yes, it's audible now, sir. Sir,
what was the problem? Anywhere I missed you?
Actually, voice was breaking, sir, and you lost the connection. Now it's okay, sir. You can continue.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There was some problem with the net. Okay. That will be corrected.
Yes, sir. So
now I'm okay, no?
Yes, sir. You can share the screen, sir.
Okay. Manish, is it okay now?
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir. You can continue, sir.
Some problem with the net. Sorry, please bear with me.
It's okay, sir. It's okay, sir. You can continue.
Understanding the remedy is very important. That means understanding the essence of the remedy. So you can find some particular symptom to identify a particular drug. So so for that you need a thorough knowledge of materia medica. When you're studying materia medica now, you're all students, I know. You'll be studying for examination purpose. So once you complete your course and when you're doing house agency, start reading materia medica in a more serious manner. My advice will be to read Ken's materia medica, Ken's lectures on homeopathic materia medica first. Complete all the drugs in Ken's materia medica. Or you can do one thing, you read one drug in Ken's materia medica and then read Allen's keynote, because Allen's keynote is an abridged version where you can get all the symptoms of that particular remedy in a very short form. So first read Ken's materia medica, one remedy at a time, then study that particular remedy in Allen's keynote also. Okay, and with this you can get an idea about a particular drug. You can get the essence of that drug. And once you complete your course, or when you are doing your internship, you can refer the Borix repertory also, because it is more practical one. That will help in your practice a lot. The Borix materia medica. And along with this one, after you complete Ken's materia medica, you can refer to materia medica by Dr. Vithalkos, where he explains the remedy as a person, the essence of materia medica. So that also will be very much useful. So studying this way, you can have a good understanding of the materia medica. And if you have a teacher who is well versed in teaching materia medica, that will be more good. I will just share a video here so that I will understand what I say. Just watch this video.
Hello, sir. Sir, I think your mic is mute, so we can't hear you.
Now it's okay, no?
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Oh, okay. I will share it once again.
Hello, sir.
So some problem. Sorry.
Yes, a
Now
little.
it's okay now.
Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
Okay, okay, okay. Just a minute. Just a minute. Oh, this even I can't stop laughing. So see this teacher here. He's teaching math fast. So he is different from other instructors. He is doing a different. So see the students there. They are not faltering they are not faltering in any step. Okay. So this is what I told you when your teacher is teaching the material medical in you will never forget somebody. Okay. You may be having such good teachers in your college, I hope. So now coming to scientific management. So I told you uh,
Hello, sir.
Manish,
Hello,
it's
sir.
okay now?
Sir, little audio is breaking, sir.
What is breaking? Okay, okay. Oh, no, it's okay. No, okay.
Now it's okay, sir.
Okay. Anyway, we will proceed. So this is it.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, some problem with I don't know.
I,
Usually just have
sir, I think some network issue is there. Audio is breaking, sir.
oh okay. Please just 2 minutes. I will change the network.
Yes, yes, yes,
Just two
sir. Yes,
minutes.
sir. Yes. Dear participants, kindly wait for some times. Some technical issues are there. We'll be right back.
So I was telling about these 17 remedies. Instead of studying all the other remedies, you can just concentrate on these 17 remedies to manage your fever cases. In 99% of cases, in 99% of fever cases, you can manage those fevers with these 17 drugs. Only in the remaining 1%, you need to apply the other remedies. Okay. As I said earlier in the beginning, only 1% is 1% of fevers are serious. So in such cases, you will need other drugs, means apart from these 17 drugs. So if you understand the essence of these 17 drugs, it is very easy for you to manage fevers in your clinic. Okay. So we will see drugs one by one. And before that, what are the points to be considered for homeopathy prescription in such cases? One is duration of the fever, always very important. What was the duration? It is a short duration or a long duration, like that. Causation also very important, because we have many drugs depending upon ailments from. Suppose a fever, the patient has got fever after getting exposed to rain, or taking an ice cream, or after taking some junk food, like that. So causation is very important. Then thirst, you can find the remedy depending upon the thirst. We have thirsty remedies, we have thirstless remedies. Then bowel movements. Bowel movements, we have medicines with constipation. That means without any bowel movements. We have medicines with diarrhea, like that. Diarrhea, even in diarrhea, we have many classifications. Okay. Then sweat, depending upon whether the patient is sweaty or not during fever. That is very important. Whether patient desires covering or doesn't like covering. We have medicines like chilliness. During chilliness, the patient will want to cover. So we have medicines which are chilly, and those medicines which are hot also. They will not cover. And looking at the tongue also, we can identify a remedy. That is a classical example is that of Rustox. Red-tipped tongue will always indicate Rustox. Then activity. Look at the activity of the child, whether he is dull or very active. If the child is very dull, we have some remedies. If the child is very active, we have some other remedies. And also provisional diagnosis. We always reach at a diagnosis in a case of fever. So reaching at the diagnosis also, we can reach it to a small group of medicine. Let's say, for example, if you diagnose the case of UTI, you will have some remedies like Cantharis, Mercosol, Mercor, nitric acid, like that. Okay. Or if you have a diagnosis as tonsillitis, we have Mercosol, Mercabinadate, Mercaprotidate, then Hepasulf, like that. Okay, Phytolaca, like that. So diagnosis also helps in some cases. Okay. Now we will see each remedies one by one. Belladonna, as you all know, is a short-acting remedy, and it is for acute infection or inflammation. And all infections or inflammations, the initial remedy will be belladonna. Okay. Here, congestion is the hallmark. You know, the redness associated with the belladonna, congestion. That means it's a sign of inflammation. Robur, Calor, Dolor are the signs of inflammation. So congestion is the hallmark of belladonna. High fever, there will be high fever, severe headache, red lips and tongue, and patient will be thirstless. In some cases, there may be thirst. Okay, high fever, very high fever. Then bowels will be irregular. The patient will be passing stool, no problem. Appetite will be good, patient will be taking food, no problem. There will be no sweating, that means dry heat, it will be dry heat. There will be high fever with a dry heat. And as I said in the beginning, in all inflammatory fevers in the initial stage, you can try belladonna, no problem. Then there's bryonia. When we come to bryonia, dryness is the most marked point in bryonia. Dryness and aggravation from motion. These are the two main features of bryonia. And this dryness of mucous membrane produces constipation also. And that produces increased thirst also. So these are the prominent features of bryonia fever. And causation is from change of weather, especially from hot to cold. So in summer weather, somebody gets exposed to rain and catches cold the next day. That is bryonia. Or he goes in the sun and comes back and takes cold drinks and he catches fever with pain in the throat. That is bryonia. That means change of weather always. That is getting wet in hot weather is bryonia. And this getting wet is, you have to differentiate with that of Rustox also. Because in some cases of getting wet in hot weather, we have to prescribe Rustox also, because Rustox means damp weather. Rustox gets fever in damp weather. Okay. So if the child is soaked in the pool or soaked in the pond for a long time, say the patient swims in the pond or in the pool for a long time, that is Rustox. But the child swimming in this pond or pool for some time and gets back and gets fever, that is bryonia. That is getting wet in for a short time in hot weather is bryonia, and if it is for a long time, it is Rustox. Thirst is prominent, and this thirst, sometimes there will be dryness of the mucous membrane only. That means if you ask the patient about the thirst, the patient will say, no, I don't have thirst. But when you examine the mouth, you can see the dryness of the tongue and lips. That is the dryness of bryonia. And tongue coated by another important feature of bryonia, white coated tongue. And thirst is what is peculiar with the thirst of bryonia. Thirst for large quantities at long intervals. At a time, he takes a lot of water, and that too cold water. He desires cold water. Okay. And dry heat with occasional sweating. When you touch the body, you can feel the dry heat, but occasionally there may be sweating. And the headache intensity will depend on the temperature. As the temperature increases, the intensity of the headache also increases. Chilliness also in the same manner, depending upon the temperature. As the temperature increases, the degree of chilliness also increases. There will be bitter taste in the mouth due to the dryness of the mouth. And appetite is reduced usually because due to the dryness and bitter taste. And another indication for bryonia is fever in winter season. That means during daytime there will be temperature, high temperature, and at night the temperature comes down. That means change of weather is there. When the days are hot and nights are cold, that's the term. When the days are hot and nights are cold, that is bryonia. And for winter season, there is another remedy, the two other remedies that is three other remedies actually: aconite, nux vomica, and hepazole. So these four drugs can come in winter season fevers, mainly bryonia and nux vomica. Okay. Then regarding Rustox fever after getting wet in damp weather, that is in rainy season. Okay. And myalgia is prominent. This is one prominent feature of Rustox is that he should have myalgia, muscle pain somewhere. Sometimes this pain may be somewhere in the legs only. When you ask the patient whether you have a body pain, he may say no, but he may say, I have some pain in the legs, like calf muscles. So that itself is enough. Somewhere in the muscles, some muscle pain. And that will be an aching type of pain. And the patient wants to take rest, always wants to take rest. Even though patient is restless, he wants to take rest. Chilliness and wants to cover. Patient always likes to cover. Usually thirstless, but Rustox is indicated in cases with thirst also. Thirst is seen in Rustox in some cases. And the particular red-tipped tongue, the classical red-tipped tongue, It may not be present in all cases. It will be seen very occasionally. Appetite is good, bowels regular, and the patient will not appear sickly even though tired and wants to lie down. Okay, that's the feature of rest talks. As I said, sometimes pain inlets may be the prescribing point. Myalgia, you will not miss in rest talks. Then Naxomica. Naxomica fever, usually it's a mild one, but in some cases there can be high fever, but usually it's a mild fever. And most of the Naxomica fevers after stomach derangements like indigestion or gastritis or enteritis. So with the gastritis or enteritis, you can have vomiting or loose stool, either vomiting or loose stool or diarrhea. And fever of winter season, another important remedy for winter season fever. And in Naxomica, what is prominent is chilliness, and the patient wants to cover. Chilliness will be prominent in Naxomica fever. And patient is usually thirstless, but can be thirsty also, but usually thirstless. And regarding the tongue, there will be mild coating on the tongue. That is usually yellowish, slightly yellow coating on the tongue, mild coating on the tongue. And bowels are regular, but as it occurs in gastritis or enteritis or stomach derangements, there can be vomiting or diarrhea. And the character of the stool is that it is watery stool. It's not offensive, no mucus, no blood, okay, just watery stool. And appetite will be good or ready. And in pediatric cases, when a child comes with a fever due to some stomach derangements, like taking some junk food or eating too much of food, in such cases, in pediatric cases, always give 1 dose of Sena-Vannam before giving Naxomica. That will give you good result. Okay. Then Gelsemium is a very good remedy in viral fevers. It's a very good remedy. And viral fevers are always very intense. Intensive fevers will be there in viral fever. There will be sudden onset. There will be high fever, and there will be patient will be very dull, dizzy, and drowsy. That typical feature of Gelsemium: dullness, dizziness, and drowsiness. The patient will come to the clinic very drowsy and very tired also, and that will be written on the face. And there will be great chilliness, and patient wants to cover. There will be myalgia. That's another feature of peculiar feature of Gelsemium. Chilliness, myalgia, dullness, dizziness, and drowsiness. That is characterizes Gelsemium fever. And also there will be severe headache. And the patient is very sickly and tired and wants to lie down, covering fully because of the chilliness. And another important feature is Gelsemium is always thirstless, never thirsty. You can, when you look at the mouth, the tongue will be clean and moist. Mouth will be moist, and patient is thirstless. Appetite will be good, but the patient will not take food because of this weakness. And bowels are regular. So Gelsemium fever, always remember chilliness, high fever, myalgia, and dullness, dizziness, and drowsiness. Okay, and always wants to cover. Patient will be always lying down, will not move from that bed. Eupatorium is Gelsemium with thirst. Usually, Gelsemium symptoms with thirst is Eupatorium. This is also another good remedy for viral fever, and the symptoms are more intense than Gelsemium. The myalgia. Here, the myalgia is, it is not the myalgia, it is bone pains or arthralgia. It's called severe arthralgia, high fever, severe headache, and thirst, increased thirst, and the tongue will be coated, thick white or yellow, thick coating of the white and yellow, and the tongue will be dry, and the patient will be very thirsty. And another important feature is vomiting in Eupatorium. The patient will have vomiting, and due to this vomiting tendency, even though patient is thirsty, he will not take water. That is the point in Eupatorium. The patient will not take water even though thirsty because he fears vomiting, and there will be constipation also. So this is Eupatorium is a mix of Gelsemium and Bryonia. More intense symptoms of Gelsemium and Bryonia. You can see constipation is there, thirst is there, dryness is there. That's all point to Bryonia. This myalgia or arthralgia, chilliness, severe headache, and weakness pointing to Gelsemium. So Eupatorium is a combination of Gelsemium and Bryonia. You can see. Okay, and this is a very good remedy in chikungunya and dengue fever.
It's good, gives very good results. Then Pulsatilla. Pulsatilla, as you know, it's a very gentle drug, mild and gentle, and fever is also a very mild one. And typical feature is dry mouth without thirst. Dry mouth and coated tongue without thirst. Tongue is dry and sometimes coated, but thirstless. Bowels are regular. All associated symptoms mild in nature, as typical of Pulsatilla. There may be weakness, but not that much weakness. There may be headache, but not severe headache. There may be chilliness, but it's not so severe. So that is the nature of Pulsatilla fever. And Pulsatilla is a very good remedy in viral infections, like mumps, measles. All these viral infections, you can think of Pulsatilla. UTI is a very good remedy. And prostatitis, that's not related to prostatitis, especially in adult males. It's a very good remedy, Pulsatilla. Then Merxol. Merxol fever is characterized by sweating. You know, in Merxol there is profuse sweating. That's a characteristic feature of Merxol. So that will be seen in fever also. Usually what we expect in fever is that there will not be sweat. But in Merxol fever there will be sweat. And some days that sweating may not be prominent, but you can see the skin is moist to touch. That's the important point. The skin will be moist to touch. There will be high fever. It's not dry heat. It is moist. Skin is moist. Okay. And it is a very good remedy in bacterial infections. All kinds of bacterial infections. What we can call as homeopathic antibiotic. Merxol is a very good antibacterial remedy. And bowels are regular. Sometimes there may be diarrhea. And the diarrhea of Merxol is very important. You know, it is always, stool is always mixed with the mucus. And is very offensive. Offensive mucus stool is Merxol. And cough in paroxysm, 2 paroxysms. You can see in pharyngitis or tonsillitis, the patient may be having cough also. And that cough will be in 2 paroxysms, like this. That is the typical cough of Merxol. And the tongue will be clean and moist, and the patient will be very thirsty. Even though tongue and mouth are very moist and clean, the patient is very thirsty. Chilliness will be there, and even though sweating wants to cover. And appetite is usually good. So that is Merxol. Perspiration is the key point. Okay, and moist, clean tongue with thirst. These are the 2 main features of Merxol. And look at the stool also, mucus offensive stool. Okay. Then Mercor. Here, Mercor, what differentiates Mercor is the dark or brown stool. And also the tenesmus, always wants to go to the toilet. And he remains in the toilet for a long time. That is the main thing. Even though stool is very less, he passes very scanty stool, which is brown in color or dark in color, and there will be tenesmus, and he will not get up from the toilet. He will remain in the toilet for a long time. And another feature is, even with this scanty stool, the patient gets tired with 1 or 2 or 3 stools. After passing 2 or 3 scanty stools, the patient gets very tired. But in Merxol, patient passes some 5 or 6 times, but the patient will not be tired. Here, in Merxol, the stool is very profuse also. But here it is very scanty stool, and patient becomes easily tired. And before every stool, there is pain in the abdomen. That is another prominent feature of Merxol. The patient will have a pain in the abdomen and goes to the toilet and sits in the toilet for a long time and passes brown or dark stool. And sometimes it is very offensive also. That is the characteristic feature of Merxol. And Asal. Asal is a very good remedy in URI, that upper respiratory tract infections, and as well as lower respiratory tract infections. Okay, and it's a very good remedy to limit URI, means it will not go to prevent URI going into LRTI. Okay, it's a very good remedy if you give it in the initial stage. What is marked in Asal is the tiredness. The prostration of Asal is very much marked. Tiredness will be marked, and fever associated with respiratory or abdominal complaints. Either respiratory complaint or abdominal complaints. Here, when the respiratory system is involved, you can get the coryza, cough, wheezing, etc. And when the abdomen is involved, we can get the vomiting or loose stool. Okay. Thin coryza, loose cough with expectoration. And in the case of stool, in the case of Asal, The stool is watery and offensive. Just in that, as in the textbook says, it is rice watery stool. Very thin, loose, watery stool, which is very offensive and very much tiredness. Okay. And there is thirst, and particular peculiar thirst of Asalb is that it takes water at frequent intervals, especially warm water. Okay. It takes a sip of water, and after some time, they again takes a sip of water. That's the thirst of Asalb. And stomach complaints usually from decayed food, fruits, or ice cream. If he gets a fever, if the child gets fever after taking a decayed food, some fruits, or after ice cream, that is, medicine is Asalb. Stool, watery, profuse, offensive, and without mucus. Very offensive, watery, profuse stool. Okay. Then Ars iodide. Ars iodide is a very good remedy in LRTI, lower respiratory tract infection, where V's is marked. V's means wrong-eye. When you examine the chest, you get a child with a fever, cough, difficulty in respiration, and you auscultate the chest, and you hear more wrong-eye or V's. You can give Ars iodide. That's a particular point that I want to stress here. And it's a very good remedy in WALR. WALR means V's associated lower respiratory tract infection. That means V's is prominent. Okay. And here the fever will be very high fever with cough, sometimes with expectoration, and this wheezing also. Okay. And when you examine the blood, when you do a blood RE, you can see that ESR will be raised in chest infections. Okay. So just by doing the blood routine examination, if you see the ESR is raised, you can prescribe Ars iodide. Okay. And in children with tubercle arthritis, that is another peculiar point. With the children coming under the tubercular myasthenia, when they get fever, you can prescribe Ars iodide. And it's the best remedy for primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Very good remedy to treat primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Another remedy, good remedy is calcareous. Okay. And fever aggravated at night. That's the usual symptom of Ars iodide. That's intermittent fever. That's fever aggravated at night. Usually tubercular cases, you can see fever aggravation at night. And dry heat with thirst. Ars iodide will have thirst, which is tongue will be coated and there will be thirst. Bowels are regular and the patient will not cover. It's a very hot patient, Ars iodide, and hyperactive and irritable. Even though the patient will be having high fever, he will not rest. He will be very hyperactive and very irritable. And apart from fever, this Ars iodide is a very good remedy in autoimmune disorders. Many autoimmune disorders like psoriasis, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, many atopic dermatitis. You can say atopy, allergy, all conditions of allergy. Ars iodide is a very good remedy. Then calcareous, it's a very prominent remedy in LRT with marked crepitations, different from Ars iodide. Here, crepitations will be marked. When you auscultate the chest, you can see more crepitations. So LRT with crepitations is calcareous. Okay, and one of the best remedies for bronchopneumonia. Not only bronchopneumonia, bronchiolitis, bronchopneumonia, pneumonia also. Calcareous is a very good. There will be severe respiratory distress. Okay, high fever with dyspnea, cough, tachypnea, and also tapping alanaceae, just like in lycopodium. Tapping of the alanaceae that shows the respiratory distress. Indrawing of the chest wall and flapping alanaceae, and auscultation shows coarse crepitations. So just by examining the chest, you can decide the remedy. That is Ars iodide and calcareous. Okay. Then cantharis is a very good remedy in UTI, urinary tract infections, high fever and associated dysuria, frequency, and urging. These are the symptoms of UTI. Chilliness will be marked. Vomiting may be there as in UTI. And this is a very good remedy in bedridden patients presenting with fever and vomiting. Always, sometimes you will get some bedridden patients complaining of fever with vomiting. In such cases, you can expect it's a case of UTI. If you do the urine analysis, you can see the pus cells. So in such cases, you can give cantharis. In high fever with vomiting, always roll out UTI, especially in pediatric cases. Apart from the gastric complaints, always think about UTI also when there is vomiting with high fever. Okay. Then Sina. Sina in fever cases of children with worm infestation. That's a peculiarity of SINA. All children with worm infestation, when they get fever, we can think of SINA. And these children will have symptoms of worm infestation like itching per rectum at night, grinding teeth while sleeping, very irritable and cross, and cries for nothing, and is relieved only by carrying. Okay, wants to be carried all the time. Patient gets relief only by carrying. And there is another indication for SINA is that's a very good finding. The patient undergoes treatment for LRT from allopathic method. After allopathic treatment, patient comes after allopathic treatment for LRT, and the presenting symptom will be the child keeps on crying, very irritable child. Normally, usually this child will not be irritable, but after getting this LRT corrected with allopathic drugs, the child gets very irritable and crying. And the only remedy that you can prescribe is SINA. The next day, the child will be normal. Okay, that's a very good point in SINA. And SINA is a very good remedy to abort febrile seizures also. You may get some patients, some children with a history of febrile seizures. The parents will tell you, last time when the patient had a fever, he had febrile seizures. So we are worried about that. We are expecting seizures in this fever also. So in such cases, you give one dose of SINA initially. That will abort seizure, febrile fits in that case. Okay, and give the correct indicated remedy afterwards. Okay. And another indication of SINA, apart from fever, it's a very common complaint in children is the periumbilical pain. It's a very common complaint among pediatric cases. The patient experiences pain around the umbilicus. When you ask the child to point out the area of pain, he will point the finger to the umbilicus. The pain around the umbilicus. And the nature of this pain is that the patient says he has pain after taking food. After taking food or after full stomach, there will be pain in the abdomen, that is especially at the periumbilical area, and the patient has vomiting or stool. It's not loose stool, normal stool. The patient goes to the toilet and passes normal stool, or he vomits out. And in such cases, you give one dose of SINA, especially 1 mg, and that will relieve the case forever. Okay. Then there is tuberculinum. As I told, this in tubercular cases, tubercular patients, as well in tubercular patients, in intermittent fever, especially fever occurring at night, and also in recurrent and persistent fevers. Some children may have the patient, the parents may complain, this child is having getting fever every week or every 2 weeks or every month, without any other serious complaints, recurring fevers. In such case, you give one dose of tuberculinum, and that complaint will be relieved. And another use of tuberculin is that when the best selected remedy fails to act, when in a fever case you find out a remedy, particular remedy, you are sure that this is the remedy, but after giving this remedy, that fever is not getting relieved, but you are sure that this is the correct remedy. In such cases, there may be some miasmatic block. So to remove that miasmatic block, you can give tuberculin. So after giving tuberculin 1 dose, repeat the indicated remedy once again, and you will get that fever controlled. Okay, and it's another good remedy for a primary pulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, and another important use of tuberculum is in febrile fits. It's a curative remedy in febrile fits. That means if you give tuberculin 1 mg every 2 weeks, one dose every 2 weeks for 3 months. In febrile fits cases, if you get a patient with a history of febrile fits, you can cure the child's febrile fits before 5 years. Usually febrile fits are relieved when the child attains 5 years of age. After 5 years, it is very rare. But you can cure that case even before 5 years by giving tuberculin. That means 1 dose once in a week, once in 2 weeks. 1 dose once in 2 weeks for 3 months. So that febrile fits will be cured forever. Okay. Then Kali-Bike. Kali-Bike is an important remedy when there is sinusitis. Sinusitis will get fever. So this is a very good remedy. And the important feature is thick yellow or brownish coryza. Usually left-sided, but can be given on the right side also. Usually left-sided, but on the right side also. And severe pain in the frontal region while stooping. In all cases of sinusitis, whether it is maxillary or frontal or ethmoidal, you can see headache is aggravated by stooping. And another important feature of Kali bike, the area of pain that can be covered with the fingertip. When you ask the patient to see the point of headache, they will point with the finger. Okay, area of pain that can be covered with the fingertip. Okay, and how will you diagnose sinusitis? Just touch the areas, frontal and maxillary areas. You can see the tenderness. Okay, here frontal area for frontal sinusitis, maxillary area for maxillary sinusitis, root of nose for ethmoid sinusitis, and you can see headache at the occipital area in sphenoid sinusitis. And another important feature of Kali bike is melena or black stool. Just like in Mercor, you can see melena. Okay, but here in Kali bike, there will be some intestinal pathology that is causing melena. Okay, any ulcerations, ulcerative colitis, any malignancies can cause melena. Then pyrogen. Pyrogen is a very good remedy in septic fevers. All septic fevers, you give 1 dose of pyrogen first. That's a very good remedy. It will act very well and relieve the fever easily. And the indication is very high fever with great chilliness, that is shivering. The patient will keep on shivering due to the high fever. And there may be local lymphadenitis. You can see inflamed lymph nodes. So that is pyrogen. So these are the indications of these 17 remedies. So you can identify these remedies very well. You can get the peculiar symptoms of these drugs, study these drugs very well, 17 drugs very well, and you can manage 99% fever cases. Only in the remaining 1% you have to think about other remedies. Okay. Now, once more, some points to remember. Thirsty remedies. Mainly Eupatorium, Bryonia, Merxol, Asal, Acidate. As I said while describing other remedies, Rustos can be thirsty, Naxomica can be thirsty, even some cases Pulsatilla can be thirsty, Tuberculin can be thirsty. Okay, there are exceptions, but just remember these points. Thirsty remedies: Bryonia, Eupatorium, Merxol, Asal, and Acidate. Okay, and thirstless remedies mainly Gelsemium, Belladonna, Pulsatilla. These are the main thirstless remedies, and other remedies are Rustox and Naxomica. Belladonna, sometimes we can have thirst also, but Gelsemium is always thirstless. Okay. Then look at the tongue, white coated tongue. Bry and Pulsatilla are the main remedies. Bryonia is the main remedy. Then comes Pulsatilla and Asal. Another remedy is Naxomica. Naxomica you can get slightly white coated tongue. Okay. Then yellow coated tongue, Eupatorium is the main remedy, and also Naxomica. Okay. White coated tongue, anti-inflammatory can come, but that remedy is not coming in this group. That's why I have omitted. Only the groups coming in this 17 are mentioned here. Only the medicines, 17 remedies are mentioned. Other remedies I have not opted out. So yellow coated tongue is main remedy is Eupatorium. Then clean tongue. Main remedies are Gelsemium and Merxol. Clean and moist tongue. Then coated dry tongue with thirst is Bryonia. You can see Bryonia has got white coated tongue and is thirsty. That is Bryonia. And coated dry tongue without thirst is Pulsatilla. Okay. Coated dry tongue without thirst. That is Pulsatilla. Then moist clean tongue with thirst is Merxol. And moist clean tongue without thirst is Gelsemium. So this is how we differentiate the remedies. Okay, it's very easy to differentiate. Okay. Find out each particular symptom with each remedy. Then we can differentiate. Okay. Just looking at the tongue, you can see prescribe a remedy. Okay. Then regarding the sweat, fever with sweat is Merxol mainly. Merxol is the prime remedy, and also Bry and Asal can be indicated. Then looking at the stool, fever with the constipation, main remedy is Bryonia and Eupatorium. Other remedies, Naxomica can be there. Then fever with loose stool, Naxomica. Just plain loose stool, no offensiveness, no mucus, no blood, just plain loose stool, this is Naxomica. Fever with loose, watery, offensive stool, that is Asal. Watery, offensive stool. Then loose, watery, offensive, mucus stool, that is Merxol. Loose, watery, offensive, mucus stool, that is Merxol. Then brown stool, fever with brown stool, that is Mercor and Calibike. Okay, and that will be offensive also, slightly offensive also. That's regarding the stool. Then covering, disease covering, Gelsemium mainly, Eupatorium also. Gelsemium, Eupatorium are the main remedies, covering remedies. Then Rustox and Naxomic also can come, Pulsatilla also to some extent. Then aversion covering, Bryonia, Arcided, Calcated, Tuberculum. These are the main remedies, Pulsatilla also. Main hot remedies, Bryonia, Arcided, Calcated, and Tuberculum, and Pulsatilla. And look at the activity. Dull in Gelsemium, as I said, very dull, dizzy, drowsy. Eupatorium also very, very tired. Asal very prostration, very much prostration. And Rustox, due to the myalgia, he is very much tired. And active, patient will be active even though there is high fever. Belladonna, Naxomica, Pulsatilla, Tuberculum, I forgot one remedy here. Arcided also. Arcided is very active. Arcided, Tuberculum, and Cinna. So these are the active remedies. Okay. So this way you can find out the correct remedy by differentiating. Session was very useful for you. Manish.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Manish, it is already 9:45. Shall we stop now?
Yes, sir. I think we can conclude the session.
Okay, you can have any questions I can answer.
If any participants having any questions, they can put in the chat box. Kindly put your questions in the chat box. Yes, sir.
There is one question by Gopika. There is potency, regarding potency. Potency selection depends upon the case. If you're sure about a remedy, if you think that this is the perfect remedy, you can give the higher potency, 200 or 1, no problem. Especially in what we study in our books is that children, in the case of children or infants, we can give high potency because their susceptibility is high, very high. When the susceptibility is very high, you can give high potency, no problem. In pediatric cases, we usually go for high potency. I usually use 200 potency. In very high fevers, I give 1 potency. Okay. My usual potency is 200, never 30 in pediatric cases. Then how to differentiate clean tongue of Ipecac and Gelsemium? That is by Sai Kiran. Yeah, Ipecac is also having a clean tongue. But thing is that in Gelsemium, the clean tongue will be very moist. Ipecac, it will not be that much moist. The tongue will be clean, but it will not be that much moist. And another feature in Ipecac is that the nausea will be prominent. Nausea or vomiting will be prominent in Ipecac. And in Gelsemium, the patient will be thirstless. Ipecac will also be thirstless, but the tongue will be very moist and clean. Okay. And the patient is thirstless. And the other symptoms of Gelsemium, we can differentiate with Ipecac. And another question from Anupama. WBC increases morning, light fever. Morning light, fever night, increases dry mouth, thirsty. How we can select remedy? WBC increases more. There is WBC increases in leukocytosis. That means there is some infection. Infection is there. Okay. Then fever at night. So that means that's an intermittent fever. Okay. Dry mouth, thirsty. So you got the remedy. WBC increase. I told you remedy, that is Arcided. Okay. Increase in WBC count. Fever aggravation night. In Arcided fever, always there is fever aggravation night. Dry mouth. Arcided has got dry mouth. It is thirsty also. So you got the remedy Arcided. Okay. Then there is one question from Padani Prajawan. In children, mother's pregnancy history is important. That is important. That is important. But not in fever cases, but other cases, other conditions we have to ask about pregnancy. How was the pregnancy? Any untoward incidents during pregnancy? All these things can help us in prescribing. And any any incidents during pregnancy, and how was the labor also, whether it was normal or cesarean. All these things, whether what we can, very pressure was used to deliver the baby. Okay, so all these things are important.
Sir, I think no more questions are there. So I think we can conclude the session now.
Okay. So I think we will have the clinical tips later in a later session, because covering the fever itself took almost 1.5 hours. So it will be boring for you also, hearing continuously from one person. Okay. So we'll have it later. And thank you once again, Mr. Manish and Sai Kiran and other organizers of this student council for inviting me. And it was a wonderful session, and I hope this will be helpful for in your practice. Always, what I told you, always read your books thoroughly. Just make thorough with minimum 40 drugs. Our constitutional remedies and other polycrests. Just make thorough with all these 40. You need just 40 drugs to practice. You don't need to have knowledge about some 100 drugs. Just 40 drugs are enough. And you can treat almost 99% of your cases with these 40 drugs. Okay, wish you all success, and your future homeopaths, and wish you all success in your future practice and in your professional life. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
I, on behalf of Alvas Homeopathic Medical College and Student Council, would like to propose hearty word of thanks to Dr. Sudhin Kumar for gracing today's webinar. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful presentation and content. It really was. All the attendees who turned up in such a great number, not only from our college, but also from other parts. Thank you for your cooperation. Once I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. See you all in upcoming sessions. Good night. Thank you, sir.
Good night. Thank you.